In this video, our SAP Analytics Cloud product experts will demonstrate the main features of our new release. Feel free to jump straight to the features you're interested in by using the timestamps in the description below. Let's dive in and hear from our SAP Analytics Cloud product experts.
For data sources such as Datasphere and seamless planning models, we now support progressive loading of top contributors whenever the number of potential candidates, dimensions, attributes, or hierarchy levels exceeds 20. There's no configuration required, everything works automatically. Let's launch Smart Insights on a Datasphere model that contains 94 top contributor candidates. In previous releases, Smart Insights couldn't run on such large models because of performance limitations, which was a major blocker for customer adoption. With the new capability, Smart Insights starts by analyzing a limited initial subset of candidates. Some candidates are purposely excluded, such as geolocation fields, because they do not provide meaningful analytical insights. The system also prioritizes candidates based on their type, hierarchy level, dimension, or attribute, and their cardinality, ensuring that the most relevant contributors are evaluated first. If I want to refine the results further, I can simply load the next batch of 20 candidates, and continue this process until all candidates have been processed. Thanks for watching.
Hello everyone, I'm Amanda Murphy, Product Manager for Modeling Integration in SAP Analytics Cloud. Today I'm delighted to announce our innovative feature, which is the introduction of the Data Export API and Delta Calculation jobs into Job Monitor. Data extraction jobs displayed in Job Monitor allow you to monitor the current status of your initial full load and data subscription jobs. Let's take a look at an example of how these appear in the monitor. Open up Job Monitor within the System folder of the navigation menu. We can see the data extraction jobs. Disable the filtering to see the running jobs in the API tab. In this example, we have no currently running jobs. We switch to our API client and run a data extraction job. Here we export the fact data of a model, where we filter on the forecast version. Note that we extract 10,000 records per page size. We can refresh the job and see the job is pending. And we can open up and see further details about this job, including the same extraction jobs that were configured in the API client and the number of records. We switch back to the job. We can run an OData next link to generate the rest of the records to be extracted. Now we can see a second page containing the remainder of the records. Next, let's generate some data extraction jobs for additional artifacts, including a public dimension, a currency rate table, and the standard unit table. When we refresh Job Monitor, we see these jobs have completed successfully. We can select these jobs for further information, such as duration and number of records that have been extracted. A new source column in Job Monitor allows navigation back to the source object. Note that the retention period of data extraction jobs is 7 days. Next, let's take a look at the introduction of Delta calculation jobs in Job Monitor. So Delta calculation jobs are created when Delta subscriptions are activated on a model. These jobs generate model cube events to capture delta changes of fact data. Let's take a look at an example of how this appears in Job Monitor. Open up Job Monitor within the System folder of the navigation menu and select the Delta Calculations option in the Data Export API tab. Now let's create a subscription in a model to collect delta changes. When we run this job for the first time, it creates an initial load containing all of the fact data contents. Here's an example of the extraction. Now let's go to the model and make some updates to the fact data and publish this to persist the changes. This action activates a delta calculation job, which runs to calculate the difference between the old and new fact data values. We can see the job now in Job Monitor. And we can see that this job has actually already completed successfully. We can select the job to obtain further information. On source systems such as S4, customers can now know when to run their export job that pull data from SAP Analytics Cloud. Note that the retention period of data extraction jobs is 24 hours. So with the introduction of data export and delta calculation jobs in Job Monitor, customers have improved monitoring and observability capabilities of their data export API jobs. Source system.
Hi, my name is Scott Godfrey, and I'm one of the product managers with SAP Analytics Cloud. And today I'm going to spend a few moments talking to you about some of the new features we have coming as part of our Q2 2026 QRC release in the planning area. And we're going to start with an enhancement we have to our advanced formula logic, and that is the ability to define a time granularity when you specify or use a first or last function. So up until this point, when you use the first or last function, it always referenced the first or last period of the year. And now you can define a specific granularity for that first or last function. So that could be a week or a month or a quarter, depending on the granularity of the time dimension itself. So with that, let's jump over and see this in action. Okay, so in my data action, you'll see that I have two measures that I'm using, D and E, right? For the measure D, I have two statements. One is the default first, historically, that uses the yearly reference. And the second where I'm actually specifying the granularity of quarter. So here I'm expecting to see 50 in January and 500 in April. In my second set of statements for the measure E, the first statement again is going to write to the yearly value, so that'll be the last period of the year, which will be December. And the second statement will write to the last period of the quarter, which should be September. Okay, now jumping over to my story, I'll execute my data action. Then I'll just sort of hide the unbooked here to make this easier to see. And we'll now see that I have 50 in January, 500 in April, 750 in September, and 75 in December. So that's the first and last function for the advanced formulas for non-year granularity. With this QRC release, we've relaxed another constraint we had, and this relates to data locking dimensions, the number of data locking dimensions. So previously, this was capped at 4 dimensions by default. Now, there was a way to extend this to 6 dimensions, but it required you to log a ticket. Now we've expanded that to allow that out of the box. So there's no request. You'll get a bit of a warning when you go beyond 4 dimensions, up to 5 or 6 dimensions, but you don't have to make any requests to enable that. So let's jump over and just see that configuration in action. So in my model, I can go ahead and add more dimensions to the lock. So product, entity, my account dimension. And now when I add an additional dimension here, I'm going to get a bit of a warning message, just that going beyond 4 dimensions can cause some performance impact. That's again why it wasn't enabled by default to begin with. But I can go up to 6 dimensions now without any restrictions.
With QRC2 2026, we are taking another important step in bringing SAP Analytics Cloud and SAP Datasphere even closer together. From now on, planners can trigger SAP Datasphere task chains directly from SAP Analytics Cloud, using a multi-action API step. What does this mean in practice? It means that a planning action in SAC can now seamlessly start calculations, like in this example, data transformations, validations, or other task chain logic running in Datasphere. In this demo, we started a calculation via the multi-action API step and calculate our HR cost with a fixed rate. This result is afterwards consumed by our Seamless Planning Live version directly on the fly. By connecting these two worlds through multi-actions, we enable a smoother, more automated end-to-end planning process. This is another step in our harmonized business data cloud vision, making SAP Analytics Cloud and SAP Datasphere work together as one integrated experience.
Another enhancement we have coming as part of this QRC release is to relax the restriction on deleting large volumes of data from the audit table. So behind the scenes, there was a bit of a timeout condition when you tried to delete a large amount of audit data. Typically it timed out around 50 million records or 5 minutes. We've now lifted that restriction, so there shouldn't be any restriction on deleting larger volumes than that. Just note that if you do delete these large volumes, that it will be a single operation. If somebody else tries to delete data at the same time from the audit table, right, their deletion will be blocked. Okay. With this release, we've enhanced our on after execute event to allow the logging and return of additional information in end user upload scenarios. So some of that information includes the name of the upload file, the target version for the upload, statistics about the upload, including uploaded rows or rejected rows, and some information for failed records. So let's jump over and see this in action. So I'm in my story, and I'm going to use some of this new information and return it to some text boxes that I have on my story. So if I look at my on after execute event, you'll see some additional information that can be returned: the statistics, rejected records, version name, file name. And you'll see, of course, in my code that I check the status for the execution, and then based on that, I'll populate some of these text fields or execute a data action. So in the case of success, I'm going to store the file name, the status, the target version, and then I'm going to go ahead and trigger a data action. So let's jump over and see this actually work. If I click my upload quantities, select my target version, forecast, and my source file, run my upload, and you'll see that my execution has ended with a warning because one of the 2 records did reject, but you'll see that the text boxes did update with the information for the upload file name, the version, and the status.
Hi, this is Lucas from Product Management. For QRC2 2026, we have 3 different API enhancements. The first one is on the data logging side. Secondly, we created a new event for the planning table. And third, for commenting, you get now an API to add multiple comments with one API call. Alright, so in this demo, we prepared something based on our new asymmetric reporting. And what we want to do now is to log the actuals with our newly created API, so directly with the array. So first of all, I will click the button in this, and then I will show you how it is working in the script. If we edit the script of this button, you can see that we created a new functionality. This new functionality, or this new API, is the setStates API. In the past, we only had the API for setState, so only one cell was reflected, and now it's possible to see that we have the array available for the setStates. With this setStates API, I can now set an array of different cells. As you can see in here, my selection of cells is pasted, and then I can set my data locking state to locked. Afterwards, I refresh my table, and as you've seen, everything was locked. Let's come to the next API enhancement, or to the next event that we created. Next event is based on the on-before data entry process. And this is basically that I can still manage something to be updated, for example, but you can see in the console that something is returning already some data, or I'm delivering some of the commands. So what do I do, for example, in here? If I try to delete now a value, I created an if statement, and this deletion is not possible. You can see it in the returning type, returning true or returning false. And nothing has been deleted. So let's see how the script is working in here. You can see besides the on-after data entry process, we now have the on-before data entry process. And this event basically gets raised before we send data back to the backend. And what we have as a parameter in here, of course, we get our cells, we get our effective context as we know it from the other event, and we have a returning type of a Boolean array. So for each cell, we can give there a returning type if the cell should be returned to the backend or not. And as you see it in this if statement, I'm checking if my old value is larger than my new value. So basically, I can't reduce my value, just for a testing example. And I can't delete my value. If I delete a value, it becomes undefined, so returning false. The third API enhancement that they deliver with QRC2 2026 is the Add Comments API. In the past, it was only possible to add one comment, and now it becomes possible to add multiple comments at one time. So what you've seen here, I pressed the button. You can see in the console, I have a returning type of 3, and this comment is now sent by me, so I created just different comments in here. Let's see the script as well. And the script, what you can see, I give there a selection with it, so my cell selection where my comment should be placed, and afterwards all my comments, and those comments will be then added.
With our Q2 release, we have an enhancement in the calendar for calendar tasks and processes. So if you assign a team now to a calendar task, the team will no longer resolve to the underlying members as it has previously, right? So it will retain the team reference throughout the life cycle of the task. Now, if a team membership changes while the task is still active, you'll see a note on the task itself stating that the team membership has changed, and you'll have the option of synchronizing the team updates. But the important note here is that the team will travel with the life cycle of the task now. So let's jump over and see this in action. So I'm in the calendar and I have a task for Q2, general task. I'm going to go ahead and add a team association for the assignees. Make this my North America planners. Just got to find them. Yep. Okay, I have 2 members. I could resolve it to the underlying team members if I want to do that. That will no longer happen automatically. We go ahead and save the task. And now let's jump over and change the team association. We'll add a new member to the team. I'll add one of my test users. And then when we go back to our calendar, that same task, we'll see that there are updates to the teams. It'll note that there's a difference between what was the team associated with this task originally and the updated team. And I have the opportunity or the option to synchronize the teams involved in this task if I want to. Now I can do this individually on the task itself, or I can perform a bulk task update. So this is the retain team reference with the calendar as part of our Q2 release. With this release, we've also relaxed some constraints on certain data entry scenarios. And specifically, this is scenarios where we have a calculated member that uses an inverse formula, where part of the inverse formula itself is a formula, but that factor is not meant to be a target as part of the primary inverse formula. Previously, when you had this kind of condition, you would get an error if the other factor, even if it wasn't a target, had a formula that didn't have an inverse formula. Right? So if you'll see my example here, I have A is equal to B times C, and the inverse is B is equal to A over C, and C itself is equal to D plus E. But based on the inversion formula, C is never meant to vary. Only B or A can vary here. Right? So historically, under this scenario, I would get a warning saying I can't update A because C doesn't have an inverse formula. So let's jump over and see this in action. So consistent with my slide, I have a model with 3 base measures and 2 calculated measures. So the calculated measures are A and C. A is using an inverse formula. It's B times C, inverse B equals A over C. Right? So only A and B are meant to vary as part of the primary inverse formula. C is equal to D times E. Right? So D and E are input, C is calculated, and A and B are meant to vary in this context. So just jumping over to my story, you'll see now that I have D and E are editable to the calculated member C, and then A and B are both now editable, right? Again, historically, A would not be editable here because C does not have an inverse formula. So again, this is an enhancement to relax the condition where one of the factors is a non-target factor in an inverse formula, and it itself does not have an inverse calculation.
Jeanne Bigonnet, Product Manager with SAP Analytics Cloud, with the main focus on the Microsoft Office Excel integration part. Happy to present you today the current deliveries for QRC2 in the Excel integration part. First, we offer a new capability in terms of connection. It's the new tunnel connection with Datasphere live sources. Next, we also now introduce the dimension comment similarly to what exists in the web in the story. So now you can add a new column and decide to explain a reason for the business that you want to apply to the specific combination of rows. But let's have a live demo to better understand this feature. Once I check the specific option on the commenting section here to allow dimension commenting, I will see directly in the table the new column appearing named dimension comment. Of course, I can change directly the name of this comments to maybe explain what I want to highlight with this commenting section. So here I will add one, and we see it has been processed and now it's part of the report. These comments are not attached to a specific cell. They are attached to the content, to the context of the table. So in my case, they are attached to the following definition, what I have put in rows, column, and in the filter. So this means if I add one dimension which is not visible already, but which is part of the definition of the table, like here the product group as example, the comments is also attached to this new added dimension. And that's why, without the need to repeat it here, it has been automatically repeated on the dimension product group now. So it's how you can easily attach a comment dimension. Last item, which is part of the QRC2, is the capability using the copy list of members to decide to exclude some members. So here you can select this using an option directly in the member selector. But let's see a live demo. In the following example, I would like to remove some product, and I already copy a list here just to make the example easier and to show you how to do it. So you go to the member selector, then you use the copy and paste menu, and we have to paste as excluded member menu. And then I just have to copy it here, and automatically you see this product will be removed from my selection. So this will be reflected, so we will see automatically this product not present anymore in the list. That's all from the news from the Excel add-in integration part. Thanks for watching.
Hello. With Q2 QRC, we have introduced various innovations as part of SAC. One of the innovation is decoupled data panel. The decoupled data panel is basically an improvement over the available objects list, which was part of the optimized story experience. Now the new data panel will be integrated as part of your right-hand toolbar along with builder panel and styling panel. This will be quickly accessible, and we'll go through all the features and the innovations that we have done with the data panel in the demo. In this demo, I would also like to show how the new drag and drop experience has been provided to our users along with the data panel, and what are some of the enhancements or improvements that we have made to the drag and drop experience. So let's start with the demo. So here I have my Stories app. Now, as soon as I create a story, you will see that the data panel is available for the user. It provides a much more guided experience to the user on how to add a data to the story. So the users can choose to add a data using a model or a data set, a data source, or a file. So here I'm choosing a model. Now in the File Explorer window, where I will be selecting a data set or a model, you can see that we have also made one more innovation, that is showing favorites and the recent. So here I would like to add a model from my favorites. So let's say I've added this model. As soon as the model is added, you can see that the objects of the model, that is measures, structure, calculations, if there are any location dimensions, then geo coordinates, other dimensions will be shown in the data panel. From this data panel, it is very easy for the user to navigate to a modeler or a data analyzer, which is opened in a different tab. Previously, for this particular user action, the user had to first save the story and then navigate into a different module. Here, the user is not prompted to save the story. It just opens in a different tab, and user can continue both the operations in parallel. Based on the user feedback that we have received from our customers, we have also introduced the option to switch between description ID and description from the data panel itself. So here the user can choose how they want to display the objects, whether they want to display it as ID or description, and also we also allow the option to resize the data panel. Here I'm trying to resize it to ensure that I can see the entire ID and description in the data panel itself. Not just this, the data panel also allows easy adding of other data models into the story. So for example, here I'm going to add one more data model. Again, I'm going to choose a data model from my favorites. I've selected a data model. The moment the data model is added to the story, you can see that the data panel reflects the new model, the objects related to the new model in the data panel. Now this data panel is basically decoupled from your builder panel and styling panel, which means that the user can access the builder panel and styling panel from the right hand toolbar. the user can collapse each panel individually, or the user can expand or collapse all the panels at once. Now let's move into, now let me show you the power of the data panel. So I would be navigating to a story. So here I have a story which has multiple objects associated with it, and you can see that in the data panel, all the models which are added to the story is highlighted. Now let me show you how the data panel helps in the drag and drop experience. So here I have a bar chart which has been added to the story, and I want to add a measure and a dimension. So here I'm going to add head count, and the moment I drag the object head count to the dimension to the chart widget, I can see that hit zones have been activated, and the hit zone which is applicable for the measure is shown in blue color, So here the measure can be added either to the measures or to the color section. So here I'm adding it to measure to keep it simple. I also want to add a dimension to it. So the moment I drag a dimension to it, you can see that only the available hit zones will be highlighted in blue color. So I can either add a dimension to color or dimensions. I'm adding it to dimension binding to keep it simple. Now let me show you another example of drag and drop. So here I have another another chart, that is a pie chart. Here I want to drag, let's say, gross margins and my product into pie chart. Now pie chart traditionally only supports either one measure or one account binding. Now let's say if you want to add a different account to the pie chart, it allows you to swap the accounts. So here I am swapping the account from gross margin to discount. Now previously, in case a user wanted to change the data model of the underlying chart, the user had to unlink the model or change the data source from the builder panel, select a new data source from the data models which have been added to the story, or you can add a new data model. Now this workflow has been extremely simplified with the data panel. So with the data panel now, if I want to change the underlying data model, all I have to do is select the data model, select the object which I want to add. So for example, I want to add, let's say, gross margin account into my chart. Of course, we have error handling mechanism. So as soon as the new object has been added from a different model, we will give a warning message saying that the data source is being reset. Do you want to proceed? On user confirmation, this particular object will be automatically added into the chart. So this way, the whole workflow of changing the underlying model has been extremely simplified. Now, as you select an object within a story, you will see that the data panel reflects the corresponding data model that has been used for building the object or the visualization within the story. Now, in case of a complicated visualization, like for example, here I have a table which has blending in it. As soon as I select the table, it will show me all the data models which has been which are part of the blending. So for example, here I have two data models which have been blended. This is an intentional, this is absolutely intentional, because we are unsure at this point which particular data model will the user be using for continued operations. If the user clicks on any area outside the widget, by default, the last data model that was selected will be shown. Again, this is intentional because we believe that the user might want to continue operation on the existing data model. So that's the reason why we show it in the data pane. Now, the power of the data panel is not limited to it's not just limited to dragging and dropping. It has a very powerful search capability. For example, I want to search a measure or an object which is starting from EX. Like I wanted to basically search for expense account or an expense measure, and what it does is shows you the count of all the objects which match the search criteria. Now, in case of a complicated data model like a universal account model, this search is not just limited to the available list of the objects, but it will also show you the list of the count of objects which match the search criteria in the hierarchy as well. So this was all about the new data panel as well as the drag and drop experience that we have introduced as in Q2 QRC. Now let's look at the next innovation. So the next feature that we would like to introduce is the query level text presentation, the BW query level text presentation without the system toggle. Previously, as part of Classic Experience, there was a toggle which was part of the system admin, where the admin had to enable a toggle to show that the text presentation setting or the description format setting in the BW query level in SAC story as well, which was defined in BW query level in the SAC story as well. Now the user now there is no need of a separate toggle. It is by default opt-in, and whatever text presentation has been set at a BW query level will be respected in the SAC without any dependence on the toggle. This allows a smoother migration of a classic experience to an optimized experience. To see a demo of what it does, so here I have a story, and I have a chart with based on a BW query, and in the dimension, when I'm choosing the display options, whether it has to be ID or description, I have the option to choose the description format. So whatever was the description format set at the query level will be automatically shown here as well. So at the query level, it was set as short. So here I can see by default as short. I have the option to choose between medium and long. But here for demo purposes, I'm keeping it at short. The next innovation that I would like to share with you is the support for additional scales. These scales have been added to SAC. These region-specific scales have been added to SAC for our South Asian customers. These scales are lakh, crore, and auto-formatted in lakh and crore. These scales will be supported for charts, geo, and tables. Let's see a demo of this. So under the styling panel, in scale, now there are three region specific scales as well, which is lakh, crore, and auto formatted. So let's say I'm setting it to lakh. I can also choose a scale format, whether I want it in small or in short form or in long form. And the particular form will be scale format will be reflected in the subtitle. That's a short and brief summary of all the innovations that we have delivered as part of the Q2 QRC. Thank you.
This feature enables account and measure input controls to be used in restricted calculations. Previously, story designers could create measure input controls, but they could not reference them directly in their calculations. This forced them to build multiple redundant calculations and maintain each one separately. Now, with this enhancement, designers can directly use measure input controls in restricted calculations, and ensuring the results are dynamic in the story. Let me walk you through a quick demo to provide more clarity. For example, you can see I have a table here. Here, I'm setting up an account input control that includes all accounts. Next, I'll create a calculation, specifically, a restricted calculation for accounts, using the new account input control I have just created. Any input control you set up here will appear in the restricted account options. Previously, only measures would be listed. Now, I will restrict by product. For example, I'll restrict to drinks and juices. This restricted calculation is now set for drinks and juices. If I want to view the discount for the California region for these products, I can simply choose it in the input control and the result will be displayed. If I wish to see the gross margin for this region and product, I just select it here. Likewise, to check quantity sold, I can quickly switch between measures and view the results. Previously, creating restricted calculations for each measure required separate calculations. With this feature, you can make a single calculation and switch between measures, updating your results interactively. So that's it for this demo. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Today, we're introducing a powerful new capability in SAP Analytics Cloud, Asymmetric Reporting. In real-world planning and financial reporting, business users rarely think in rigid, uniform tables. They need flexibility, different views, different levels of detail, and meaningful comparisons all in one place. That's exactly what asymmetric reporting enables. It allows you to design tables where different sections use different dimensional selections or structures. The result is more intuitive, more expressive, and far closer to how finance teams actually analyze data. Asymmetric reporting is powered by three key innovations: measure input control in restricted measures and cross calculations, dynamic time filters for rest of period, and visibility filters for table widgets. Let's see this in action and see how asymmetric reporting comes to life in a real scenario. In this demo, we've built a rolling forecast table with the following structure. Accounts are displayed in the rows. On the columns, we show actuals from January up to the cutoff date in April. Then, we display the rest of year forecast, starting 1 month after the cutoff date through to the end of the period. We also include a full year actuals plus forecast view across the entire year. Alongside this, we present the full year budget, aggregated at the quarterly level. And finally, we calculate the delta, showing the difference between budget and actuals plus forecast. Now, let's see how the three innovations work together. The first innovation, measure input control in restricted measures and cross calculations, allows us to expose three input controls: current date, forecast version, and currency measure. These dynamically drive the table. For example, current date lets us adjust the cutoff date on the fly, from April 2025 to July 2025. The second innovation, dynamic time filters for rest of period, ensures that when selecting July 2025, actuals automatically display from January to July, while the rest of year forecast starts in August through to the end of the period. In addition, the other input controls let users switch the forecast version or the currency in real time. Finally, visibility filters for table widgets control what is displayed: months for actuals and forecast, while the full year budget is shown at the year and quarter level. Let's go one step further and see how these three innovations are implemented in edit mode to power the table and its interactivity. If I select the table and open the Builder panel on the right, you can see that we are using restricted measures for the columns: actuals, rest of year forecast, full year actuals plus forecast, full year budget, and delta. To better understand how the three innovations are applied, let's edit the first two restricted measures. The actuals measure uses the currency input control as a dynamic measure, which is our first innovation. For the time range, it is set to dynamic, using the current date input control as the anchor. The second innovation, include range up to current period, then automatically determines the cutoff date. The same logic applies to the rest of year forecast measure. It also uses the currency input control as a dynamic measure, along with the forecast version input control to dynamically select the version. For the time range, it is again dynamic, based on the current date, and uses the rest of current period and start from next period options to define the forecast horizon from the month after the cutoff date to the end of the period. Finally, the third innovation, visibility filters for table widgets, must be enabled on the measure structure to allow an asymmetric layout. It is then configured for each restricted measure. For example, the actuals measure uses visibility filters on the time dimension to display only monthly members. The same applies to rest of year forecast. However, for the full year budget measure, which displays yearly and quarterly data, the visibility filter is set to year and calendar quarter levels. For full year actuals plus forecast, which display only the totals for the period, we only select totals in the visibility filter. When used together, these innovations enable true asymmetric reporting and allow you to build a fully dynamic rolling forecast table. This concludes the demo. Let's review now in details the three innovations, starting with the first one, measure input control and restricted measures and cross calculations. This capability allows you to use a measure input control directly as the basis for calculations within your report. Instead of being limited to predefined model measures, story designers can now build calculations dynamically based on user-selected measures. This brings a new level of flexibility, enabling more interactive and context-driven reporting. Let's move to the second innovation, dynamic time filters for rest of period. This feature introduces new options like rest of month or beginning of year, which automatically adjust based on the current context. Instead of manually selecting time ranges, the system dynamically calculates and displays the relevant future or remaining periods. This makes time-based analysis more intuitive, more dynamic, and perfectly aligned with planning and forecasting scenarios. Finally, the third innovation, visibility filters for table widgets. This feature gives you precise control over what is displayed in your table, down to specific dimension members or hierarchy levels, without impacting the underlying data or calculations. Each row or column can now present a different view, tailored to its specific context. This is what truly enables asymmetric reporting, allowing you to build reports that reflect real business logic, not just fixed structures. That's the end of the video. Thank you for your interest. Today,
Q2 QRC, we now also allow showing totals on blended visualizations and tables. In this particular innovation, we now allow the users to display total aggregated value across the blended models within a table or a chart. This is supported for S4HANA and BW4HANA blended scenarios. The supported aggregation includes sum, min, max, no null, no zero. We also provide support for tooltip guidance for unsupported measures, and totals are dynamically updated with the filters. Some of the restrictions with displaying totals on blended models are the total is supported only for the new table experience. The backend dependency includes the SAP S4HANA should be on Q3, QRC should be great. Minimum version of SAP S4HANA should be Q3 QRC of 2025, that is EPM 2025.28. The BW4HANA minimum version should be 7.5, Service Pack 33. If there are exception aggregations in subqueries, rankings, advanced aggregation scenarios, it will not be supported for displaying totals. Now let's look at a demo. So here I have a visualization which has a blending scenario, and I would like to display the total on career level. All I can do is I can go to my three-dot menu for the dimension and display total.
With Q2 QRC releases, we are delivering additional features that we enable Microsoft Teams as a delivery channel for my metrics report. So within actually, if you are subscribe a report, now you can select Microsoft Teams as a delivery channel. Then all actually your report will disappear in your Microsoft Teams channel. That will inclusion of key details such as subscription info, reoccurrence, metric values and changes, and a link to the metric list. Now let's move to the demo. So here we see actually I have my metric list. So here I can subscribe to the metric list. I can write some and just copy paste this one, and then we can go to the next step, schedule, and then go to the next. And here it's important that you can add recipients. Here we have additional option called send emails to Microsoft Teams channel. And here you need to actually have the email address of your Teams channel. And I already have a team email address of my Teams channel. Select on that, click on the save, and then you just actually to click on the save button. Then this subscription job is created. Now you will be able to receive your report in your Teams channel. So if you open Teams, you can see here I actually create a Teams channel. Within this Teams channel, I'm able to actually receive this kind of report. The same like actually I'm receiving with the email and also the SAC notification. You can see actually the values, key figure values, and you will be open. Here is also a link to open the metric list. With that, it's much convenient for you to, via Teams, to get the most important change of your key figure from your business. Here, I would like to introduce another new feature of the Composite. That's the enablement of interface property in Composite calculations. The idea is that we want to leverage one single composite definition to support multiple dynamic scenarios. For example, composite with different thresholds value with different reference lines. So the solution is that you define an interface property and you can define calculated measures based on that interface property. Based on the calculated measures, you can define different threshold and also the reference lines. That the story designer can, for different composite instance, to define different threshold and also different reference lines and based on one single composite definition. So that will save extremely a lot of time and effort for defining the composite and also for the story designer to using the composite to match different scenarios. Now let's have a look into the demo. First, I would like to introduce what kind of scenario we want to enable. So here in my scenario in the story, there are different composite instances based on the different data models and the different threshold and the different reference line. And in the design time, I only need to define one composite definition and then to supply all these different composite cards. And these different composite cards has different threshold values and the reference line. And the threshold values needs to be defined by the story designer instead of the composite designer. So with that, we can, in the composite designer, we can enable that scenario. So first you need to do is define this threshold value, like here, as an interface property. Once you have that, and you can define the calculated measures based on this interface property. So here I define a calculated measures called threshold value, and based on this interface properties easier. And once you have these calculated measures, and then you can define the threshold and the reference line. So here we can see I have already defined this threshold, and our threshold is termination rate based on this threshold value. If the termination rate and if this key figure is more than the threshold value, then it should be shown in green. If this key figure less than threshold value, then it should show in red. So that is defined. And the same for the reference line. We are defining a dynamic reference line. The reference line is basically this threshold value. Once you have that, you go to your story design time. And we keep up, for example, this KPI tile succession pipeline. So go to this interface properties and to configure it. So here I have this interface property and a threshold value. And here you can, as a story designer, you can directly configure this threshold value for succession pipeline. For the succession pipeline, I can say, oh, this threshold I would like to define to 0.8. Click on done, and we save it. And then we just directly go to the view. Let's view it. Composite definition define this different threshold. We can see that the threshold is 80%, actually value is 70%, so it shows in red. So that is extremely helpful capabilities that the interface property can be defined, can be used in the defining the calculations. And with that, we can define the very dynamic scenarios, enable story designer to define different threshold value, define different reference lines, and based on the different key figure, and without write any codes. Now with QIC Q2 releases, Composites can also run within the light viewer. So if your story contains Composites, and then story can be also run within light viewer, that will enable fast loading for story using Composites. Now let's have a look into the demo. So you can see that again, this composite demo and this story are containing different composites. Now I actually click on the view. Then you can see that the light viewer is loaded, and for the light view, you can see if it's a home icon here, it's a light viewer, and it's loaded here, and then you can see that all this story containing composites can be started or rendered within light viewer for fast loading experience. Hello everyone, here I would like to introduce a highlight of the Q2 delivery that we are delivering the versioning support for composite artifacts. With that features, we will allow composite designer to manage up to 10 versions of composite. And the current version is the only active version used in the story. All the previous version can be opened in read-only mode and review without affecting the current version. And Composite designer can save a previous version as a new composite or restore it. When restoring, a backup of the current version is created automatically. All versions, current and previous, always use the latest state of models and other shared resources. And the transport between tenants always use the current active version. All composite versions are visible in the file repo and during the composite design time. Now let's move to a demo. So now you see actually the composite design time. Here I define this composite as a tile. I can open the version management, for example, and to actually save a version. For example, I would like to save a version that I call that original version. Save it. Then in the version history, you will be able to see that it appeared here as an original version. Now I'm going to do a modification actually for this composite. For example, here I would like to modify the time period. I would like to change this chart from Q1 2024 to the Q2 2025. Click on Set. Okay, then I save actually a new version called the new version. So I'm save actually the new version. Once I save that, and this new version is also automatically the current version. So with that, we already learned before that the actual version, active version, will be used in the story. So we see actually this and composite version will be leveraged in the story. Now actually move to the story. So that's the story I leverage this composite. So now if I refresh the story, reload the story again, you will be able to see within the story the active version of the composite are leveraged. You can see this composites are here 5 composites, right? And all actually show you the time frame from Q1 2024 to the Q2 2025. And once actually here I restore the original version, go to Composite, for example, and I have here actually an original version. I can open it to the original version, and I can click on the restore the original version. So click on the restore. So original version is restored. And then if we now actually move to the story, we will be able to see and in the story that these all use already this version. Let's move to the story and then refresh that again. Then we will be able to see the restored composite version is now shown here. You see the time period actually are all already updated. So that's the versioning concept of the composite, the same concept as like the story. You can manage a different version of the composite, and you can, and always the active version are leveraged within the story. Thank you. Another new feature for the composite is that if you are a BDC customer, now you are able to import SAP-Delivered composites and into your own story, and also to create your own story based on SAP-Delivered composites. The benefit is that you will get benefit from ongoing SAP updates for the composite. Means once SAP updates the composites, and then your in the composites in your story will be updated automatically. And that while you are importing the composite into your story, now an additional entry is appearing in the dialog box with the Q2 QRC release, that's intelligent apps. And here you are able to, for example, click on the intelligent apps and to import page header, application share bar, or KPI tile into your own stories, and then create your own story based on SAP-Delivered composites within the intelligent applications. So now let's move into the demo. So here you would like to create a new story, and then you would like to import the composite into the story to use it. So here in the Q2 QRC releases, you will find a new additional entry, intelligent apps. Within the intelligent apps, you will see different folders, and if this folder are containing composite, you will be able to import this composite for your own use. For example, I have here a composite page header, application shell bar, and then I'm able to import this composite into my own stories, and then build my own story based on SAP-Delivered composites. The advantage is that once SAP updates this composite, then my application, my story will automatically get this update. Thanks a lot. That's a new feature.
Thanks for watching. Hopefully our demos have helped you leverage the latest features in SAP Analytics Cloud in your organization. Remember to leave a like on this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Analytics Cloud. We have a lot of exciting new features coming your way in 2025, so stay tuned and we'll see you next time.